around the table. So psychologically, when you stand in front of an audience, right, you fear, you have this group pressure fear because you're a singled out person at the front of the room, and the rest of the tribe is in front of you. So if you make a mistake, it's a lot more dangerous. Inside the nervous system. So no, I was not nervous at the inside the U.S. Senate in the Kennedy caucus room.
Were you questioned by any of these senators? Because they've got fiery reputations. I mean, we've all seen Ted Cruz or John Kennedy, and he's got a way of doing it that is respectful yet belittling at the same time, right?
Well, the U.S. Senate, the way it operates, that was the Kennedy caucus room. So it's designed for individual investigation. So there were some senators there, but it was led by Senator Ron Johnson. So yeah, there was like 30 cameras there. We didn't have any cross referencing of what we were saying. There was no one drilling us like, say, a lawyer would inside a courtroom. But Senator Johnson actually asked me who they were, which quieted my group quite a bit, because my group knows I'm well aware of who they are, and they would probably prefer I keep that to myself, which I did.
Listen, man, I have to tell you that people have been asking to get you on this show for a couple of years at least. And for whatever reason, I haven't been able to get you. So I'm happily surprised that you responded to my request last week. And some of the videos that you've released, not necessarily, maybe it's not even you who releases them. I don't know. People pick them up, right? From your website, maybe, or from a Rumble channel. They'll make a short out of them. They'll put them on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. And so they wind up in the short video section. As you're flipping through there, you see these things. And one of them caught me last week where you're just walking down the street, minding your own business, and something had happened that made you say, this is going to be a turning point. Now, I don't know when, because there's no information on when the video was actually made. And I couldn't find it, right? So I'm thinking, what was the thing that was the turning point? I need to know this. Do you recall making that video?
Well,
and what the turning point might have been?
The thing is, I've written now, how many? 4,000 articles. I've done 500 interviews, and I've probably done 2,000 or 3,000 walk and talks. So, and I've been posting on Facebook for 15 years in a row. So every day, I don't think I've ever missed a day. Even when I'm on vacation, I'll throw something up. So it's not like it's an addiction. It's just to try to keep the people educated, because if they're not educated in this regard, they're going to have a real hard time. I consider myself a big helper of humanity, because if you don't understand mind control, you're sort of dead in the water. You are really at a very huge disadvantage if you're unable to process or unable to see the characteristics of a psychological operation.
Let me ask you, you are an expert in this. You're an expert in propaganda. You're an expert in mind control. You recognize it instantly the second that you see it. But there's so many different kinds of it out there. Advertising, I suppose, is a form of it. And, even school, public school, a form of indoctrination, a form of mind control. How is it recognizable? And to what level do we have to worry? I mean, school is one thing, but when they start talking about safe and effective, that's a whole other matter.
Well, it's sort of like asking a fish what water is. The fish will be like, what are you talking about? And you would say to the fish, well, it's all around you. And because it's all around the fish doesn't recognize it because it's all it knows. We live on planet mind control. It is 24-hour a day indoctrination, propaganda, brainwashing, and mind control. Every government policy, every ad on TV, all the news stations, all the TV shows, all the movies, they are there. They're not there for the reasons we're taught. They're there to control us, to control our thoughts, to control our perceptions. I mean, even if you take the movie Contagion, with it was with Matt Damon, Lawrence Fishburne. It came out in 2011. There was social distancing mentioned in that 2011 film. Why did they do that? The gyms were all closed. The airports were all closed. There was many situations in the movie of died suddenly. There was, guess what country in the movie Contagion, guess where the outbreak originated from?
I can't remember. I've seen that movie, and I can't remember. Was it the Canada?
China. No,
Oh,
China.
of course, it's China.
Right.
Of course.
Right. So they call these things, and there was everything. There was hand washing, social distancing, quarantine, shutting the businesses down. And the reason, so this is the issue when you start trying to explain how mind control works. It's the width of the scam, the girth of the scam, the depth of the scam. The average person, Shadow, would not believe that their movies and their TV shows are involved with mind controlling them to put them into these long range psychological operations. Like the past 30 years, there was near 400 or 500 movies released to the public that were in the genre of zombies and vaccines save the day, viral genre movies. And if you want to know how propaganda and brainwashing and mind control works, 85% of it is repetition. Repetition wins the day for truth and fact inside your nervous system. Your nervous system has this brilliant part of it called the subconscious mind. It loves you, and like everything else, it wants to protect you, but it has invisible ways of protecting you, just like a cut healing. If you cut your face shaving, Shadow, and you're coming on camera, can you yell at your face and tell it to heal fast so that you can look better when you get on the screen? Of course not. You're not in control of your heart beating. You're not in control of a cut healing. Females not in control of their menstrual cycle. You're not in control of your hair growing. You're not in control of your subconscious mind counting for repetitive content in your environment out of a protective need. Now, the reason it looks for repetitive content is it wants to see what the bigger herd is saying, thinking, or doing, because it's safer to adopt those behaviors and beliefs as your own. So once it identifies the repetitive content, and that's outside your conscious awareness, so you don't even know what's going on. It will also, outside your conscious awareness, force you to adopt it as fact and truth and integrate it into your own behavioral system outside your conscious awareness. And there's many ways to upregulate this natural protection system. I give this example all the time. In 2001, there was a movie called Gone in 60 Seconds with Angelina Jolie and Nicolas Cage. It was about car theft. And basically, when you, as a human being, and the subconscious rep counting process comes to standard equipment on the human body, and again, it's protective. It's trying to find out what tribe you're in, so you can know the customs and rituals, so you don't get your head cut off, so you can mimic the rituals and customs of the tribe you're in. When you're sitting in the theater, it's been shown this part of the brain doesn't know the difference between imagined thought, what's on the screen, and what's in real life. So when you're sitting there and you're watching the screen, your subconscious is thinking, hey, you know what? I love Shadow. I believe Shadow has come into a different tribe. It appears through the repetitive content that I'm processing through the eye and the auditory centers that Shadow has entered a car theft tribe. And for Shadow to be as safe as possible, we want him to flash the gang signs of the tribe he's in, which is car theft. Now, if I interviewed anybody in a Cineplex lobby before they watched any movie and said, do you think repetitive content in the movie you're watching could impact your behavior when you left the theater? They would say, absolutely not. That's fantasy. That stays inside the theater. I run my own life when I leave the theater. Well, in Burnaby, BC, Canada, when that movie came out, car theft went up 70% in the first 4 days alone, and they found this social contagion in other cities where the movie was being shown. And if we hark back to Contagion and the other 400 virus zombie vaccine saves the day genre, major motion pictures, it's there to lay in the repetition, to lay the foundation of fact, to lay the foundation of truth, to trick the subconscious mind pathway into believing that safety can be found in the bigger herd of that particular belief, that particular belief system, that viruses are real, that zombies are real, that vaccines will save the day, that social distancing is a logical solution. And people really have a hard time understanding that this is how mind control operates. And the movies are not there to entertain you. They're there to entrain you. And this movie industry is run by a very old, ancient family line that most people don't know anything about. They're coming up to speed on it recently. A lot of information is out in regards to what sort of ancient crime syndicate is operating all of these mind control levers. But the average person, Joe and Jane coffee shop and Mike and Michelle mask wearer, they have no idea how their behaviors and their ideas and beliefs can be controlled through repetitive content in their newspaper, in their movies, in their TV shows, on their radio, and on their billboards, and through government announcements. And they all work hand in hand. All these things are like pieces of a watch. The average watch has 150 pieces in it, and every piece works together to accomplish one particular task, which is telling the time. And everything is involved in our society to form or basically manufacture consent for whatever that ancient crime syndicate wants to accomplish that year, that decade, that millennia, whatever they want to do.
Jason, is there anything that isn't mind control? Because as you say, fish, water wouldn't know the difference. We're surrounded by it. Is there any way, I mean, even parents yelling at you to look both ways before you cross the street when you're 4 or 5 years old, would that be considered mind control, or is that just teaching?
It's the same thing. The only reason we remember, say if your parents yell at you, your nervous system operates a certain way. That's why your parents are yelling in the first place, because if they yell at you and scare you, you're more likely to adopt the behavior. And this is why all psychological operations run by this ancient crime syndicate will start off with fear, a massive fear buffet. It happened in 2020. We had the Chinese actor out of Wuhan falling flat on his face. And then we had the full ticker tape running across the bottom of all the deaths. And they do this. The reason this works really good is fear is proven to change brain function. So you basically have two parts of your brain. There is a very high IQ, logical, rational, loving, compassionate part, like the CEO of the brain. It's supposed to check stupid and moronic ideas before they come out and play out in real time. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It's just behind the forehead. It's the most advanced portion of your brain complex. Now, if you're in fear, guess what part of the brain gets shut down in relation to blood flow and electrical conductivity? It's the prefrontal cortex. But don't worry, there's a secondary part of the brain that will jump in. Your body's not... it's not engineered to be flawed. It's engineered to be perfect. When you're afraid, this, loving, compassionate part of the brain that thinks of great ideas gets shut down. your body doesn't want you thinking of great loving ideas when you're afraid. It just wants to get out of the situation, out of the fearful situation. So there's a shunting of blood flow and electrical conductivity to the limbic system, which is called the hindbrain because it's in the back of the skull. It's also known as the reptilian brain, or the R complex, the R standing for reptilian. It's notoriously low IQ. It does not think of the long-term consequences of its actions, and it's heavily compliant to authority or perceived authority. So if I can start any psychological operation with scaring you, like telling you there's a killer pathogen floating in the air, and they pick these fear-based constructs because it's been shown again in psychological research, nothing frightens you more than something you can't see because you cannot defend yourself against it. So if it was a Red Dawn situation, showing my age, the Patrick Swayze version, when the it was the Russians actually that came, the Koreans was the second version, and you could see the enemy, you could fortify yourself appropriately. It's been shown nothing scares human beings more than the invisible. So all this is.
You know what's interesting? I'm sorry to interrupt you. You reference movies and you talk about like the villains. As I think about it, it was the Russians in the first Red Dawn, and Russia has always been the villain, right? Or Korea, but never China. Like rarely is China ever the villain in any epic spy movie or war movie. I find that amazing, don't you?
I mean, there's reasons for it too. It's because they'll always teach you, like, this is a good sort of psychological priming. It's called, where all this pre-priming of the Russian enemy. When we were kids, it was always Russia that was the enemy, and then they pull it out when they're attacking Trump. Where they said, he's a Russian operative, or Russia backed him, or Russia this, or Russia that. And that's meant to trigger what's called dormant programming, which is another arm of psychological operation, where you put in programming for something else, and you can pull it out absolutely any time that you want to sort of match repetitive content. And see, it's all about repetitive content, because repetitive content is the bigger herd, and we're herd-based animals, and we will flow and move and have a magnetic affinity for the most repetitive message. You could have had 30 anti-Russia repetitive imprints 2 decades ago and had none since then. And then when you have the one repetition, with say 6 years ago when they're attacking Trump using this false Russian narrative, that's the repetition that brings the other 20 to the surface. That's called dormant programming. And people have no idea that there is a set of controllers. There are people at the levers of propaganda. And they're always using it to keep the people in fear. The best use of propaganda is what we would call self-sabotage. I want to
come to that. I want to come to that because that's a big, huge one. And I know that's a big part of your program. And I want to talk about that. That's actually one of the big things that people say. You got to get them talking about self-sabotage. So that definitely, I want to cover that. But let's get back to the programming. Operation Mockingbird, created in the 1950s. That's what this is. It was exposed by Rolling Stone magazine, of all things, back in 1976 as an operation that had been in existence for, I'm going to say, 20 years at that stage. They never did mention in that article, though, and I've read that, if it was terminated, the project. I believe it's only expanded. Are these the people who are in charge of putting these little snippets into these movies? Is it just the story that they're telling, or are there actual subliminal messages within the film of these movies, television shows, newscasts?
Yeah, my friend's a Hollywood actor. He's been in 150 movies, and I've talked to him about these things. And there are most of these things. Where do you think the word propaganda comes from? The first phonetic word in propaganda is prop. And your subconscious will scan the full screen. Your conscious mind focuses on Brad Pitt or Matt Damon, and you're always looking at the star. Your subconscious, which again loves you, wants to protect you, wants to lead you to greater safety and security. It's not really focused on just Brad Pitt or Matt Damon, taking in the full spectrum analysis of what's on the screen. And what's on the screen, it will also count for repetition. Now, this group, wherever they want you to go, they will make repetitive content throughout the film so that your subconscious mind is tricked to have a magnetic affinity for that particular product. Now, this is what advertising is as well. I mean, when you see Nike, 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 or Under Armour, Under Armour, Under Armour, Adidas, 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 your subconscious mind is basically trying to assess what the bigger tribe is. Who advertised the most will represent the biggest tribe. And then you will feel safer. You'll feel a sense of security and safety when you actually see that coat or pair of shoes when you're out shopping, and that you'll have a magnetic draw to it. You won't understand why you love it, why you want it, why you have to have it, why you're so thrilled because you just bought safety and security. You just got mind control to buy that particular item. Now, in the movies, they have basically two sort of sets of mind control. They have a secondary set, which is ongoing, and then they have this sort of primary set for the agenda of the day. The secondary set of mind control, repetitive content in all movies is much more interesting. And this will really baffle people here. They will not understand. They will understand what I'm going to say, but they might think it's not real. But the most repetitive theme in all Hollywood movies as a secondary psychological operation, which means ongoing long-term, is coffee. I dare challenge anyone to watch any movie tonight and really, as he's drinking his coffee, and there's reasons for this. So, in the first 15 minutes of any major motion film picture, you will either see a takeout coffee cup, a clay coffee mug, a coffee machine on the back counter, whether it's an espresso machine or a percolator coffee machine, or you'll see a coffee shop or in the background, something about coffee. And there's reasons they want you drinking it. And I mean, we could get into it, but basically I will tell you that the basics around coffee is being shown to be one of the most effective mind control substances ever researched. Because caffeine.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
No. Well,
No,
basically,
go ahead.
Caffeine is what's called an alkaloid poison. And the coffee plant, and there's many other plants that uses caffeine in the same way that a coffee plant uses it, which is basically the coffee plant will riddle caffeine throughout the plant entirely, but it'll concentrate it also in the pods. So it'll drop the pods around the periphery of the plant, killing other plants so that the coffee tree can grow higher. And then if a bug tries to eat the caffeinated plant, the caffeine's a poison. It will kill the bug. So it's a pesticide and a herbicide. So when you consume caffeine, you do get some sensations of calmness and euphoria, but that's just because of the way the caffeine poison is processed through your body. Anytime you're poisoned, guess what part of the brain shuts off? The prefrontal cortex. Guess what part of the brain turns on? The limbic system, hindbrain, R complex, which means if you're caffeinating once a day, and this group, it's like a casino. Who's going to comply? Who's not going to comply? Are they all going to comply? Absolutely not. Not everybody will comply with the repetitive content. But here's the thing. When you're poisoned, you're very compliant because you're afraid. but you're also injured because you're poisoned. So your nervous system understands Shadow poisoned himself. He's not as strong as the unpoisoned version of Shadow. And between the two versions of Shadow, the poisoned one and the unpoisoned one, who needs the tribe more, Shadow? Who's stronger? Poisoned Shadow or
Poison,
unpoisoned?
well,
Right.
unpoisoned
Poi-
shadow would be.
Stronger. Yeah, stronger people do not need the group. So whatever the repetitive content is in the environment, it represents the bigger group. When you're weak, you can only survive by bonding with the bigger group.
You know
So the
what's
weaker,
interesting?
yeah, go
You
ahead.
you you talk about coffee, and years ago, I was working in a I don't want to call it a pyramid scheme. What was it? It was my girlfriend was doing it, marketing, multi-level marketing. And one of the things was, all right, if you want this program to be successful, you can't drink coffee for a period of 30 days. And you would not believe, I guess you would, but maybe you guys watching, you would not believe the reactions that you would get from people. Oh, well, I can't do that then. Oh, no, 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 no. I have to have my coffee. I have to have my coffee. So when you said that just a couple of minutes ago, I went, oh yeah. I mean, that is one of the things. It's probably more dear to people, or maybe they're more addicted to it than cigarettes or anything else, even drugs, gambling, you name it. Interesting
See,
point.
right. And the thing is, why they're afraid to give it up isn't based on its chemical effect because it's poison. It's based on the fact that it's the most repetitive content on their screen, therefore giving the biggest feelings in the nervous system of security and group bonding. And when you tell them to give it up, they feel afraid because they're going to be outside the herd. It's all
So this
based
is
on group pressure.
so this is programming then, and it's long life. I was about to ask you when the pandemic first struck, when they first announced it, and they started telling people that you have to shelter in place, you have to social distance, you have to wear a mask, and then later came the vaccine. You talk about the fear response and the limbic system. Is that a momentary response? And are our brains allowed after that response is over with to get it together? Or is that a long lasting thing? Or is it just being
It
pounded over and over again by the messaging?
it's supposed to be short. I mean, the fight, flight, or freeze system is supposed to be same thing as a zebra getting chased by a lion. The lion goes out once a day. Everybody runs like hell. One zebra goes down, and then everybody else calms down and keeps eating the grass. It's not supposed to go on all the time in our natural environments. But guess what our social engineers figured out? Let's keep them stressed all the time. Like if you're caffeinated all the time, you're fight or flight all the time. So you're not going to turn it off. See, the thing about the fight or flight, I should explain, it might make it easier, is that it will be activated by a threat to your lifespan. So it could be a mugger because most people will understand, yeah, it's a mugger or a pit bull's chasing me. Or I saw my girlfriend with another man, like sort of like the threat to your lifespan. Because of course, if your partner's not with you in the jungle, you have to hunt alone. Your lifespan is threatened. So you have the same fight or flight response if your partner's out and around. But the thing is, your body's really smart. If you poison yourself, it knows that this threatens your lifespan. So there's an automatic activation of your fight or flight system. Your body would never think you would voluntarily ingest or inject poison into yourself. And then just think of the average person, a Shadow. So number one most repetitive content in all Hollywood film is coffee. Guess what number two is?
Used
Alcohol,
to be, I'm sorry to say booze. Right. Okay. Yeah.
booze.
Yeah.
So look, and because it poisons, I mean, you're not going to have any access to your prefrontal cortex when this stuff's floating in your system. So of course, and then look at the average person's lifestyle. They're getting up, they're listening to the radio on what about their job that they don't like? You don't think that causes fight or flight? I mean, it's being shown 72% of Americans don't like the job that they work. So you get fight or flight, you're up with this loud alarm. I'm an entrepreneur. I've worked for myself since the day forever. I've only worked for people as a server at Eastside Mario's, and I worked at a mattress factory 30 years ago to save the money from my first business. I've been self-employed every day since that time for 30 years straight. I get out of bed every morning without an alarm clock, excited to go out and do what I do to make myself a living. So imagine the average person. They get up. 72% of people don't like what they do. They're in fight or flight. They turn on the radio, and the radio will never, you have to understand, the radio is there to mind control you too. There's no empowerment on the radio. There's no radio station that teaches you how to get out of the matrix, how to start a business, how to be healthy. It's just Chuckles the Clown down at whatever radio station telling you to come down and eat a hot dog, a cancer-causing hot dog, and have a cancer-causing Pepsi to raise money for the cancer patients in the cancer ward. I mean, this is, and then everything else is, take the shots, go get your colonoscopy, go and vote. Like everything, there's nothing there that's not mind control programming. So then they're having their coffee before they go. So they're limbic. They're in the limbic system. They're in the fight or flight system. They have more poisoned food for lunch, super stressful at work. They're in the fight or flight all the time. Then they come home, they have poisoned wine, poisoned alcohol, some more poisoned food. And then they watch actors shoot, kill, and murder each other on Netflix. You're telling me that of course, this is engineered. The person's in fight or flight the entire time. And it's been shown that the average human, when they're in the fight or flight for this long, it's chronic, their skull actually starts to change because there's so much blood flow and growth of the limbic system that the back of the skull starts to sort of grow out.
You're making me feel like the back of my skull is starting to grow out.
So this is I know it's sort of scary. And I mean, go back to the coffee. I just tell people, look, if you want to understand how dangerous coffee is physically, not even mind control wise or any of the other levels that I talk about, just physically, it causes depression, carpal tunnel, ulcers, strokes, peripheral strokes, causes Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, osteoarthritis. It causes heart attacks. It causes so many things. You can read Caffeine Blues by Stephen Chernisky just to get the physical aspects of coffee, how detrimental it is to the human body. And guess who owns Starbucks, people? Like, guess who Starbucks was going bankrupt in 1987. There's a guy called Howard Schultz who actually worked there and said, they told this guy, look, where you work is going bankrupt. But if you want to keep your job, go raise $2 million. We'll sell you the 6 shops. There was only 6 shops at the time. So he actually went to a big investor and said, you have $2 million. I got all these shops. Here's the paperwork. Here's the income statements. And the investor said, wow, great work, Howard. I really like it, but I don't need you. I'm going to run it myself. So Howard Schultz, who everybody knows is he's not the CEO anymore. He sold out for billions of dollars. But he sulked and he went to a basketball court or he went to some other leisure place where he told his sad sack story to some other person and said, hold on a second. I got someone I think you'd like to meet. And they went and told this story to a very large, tall man in Seattle. And they said, this guy seemed to got screwed over. It was his idea. And he says, oh, yeah, I know that guy that screwed you out of the deal. And this guy went down and poked that other guy, went right into his office unannounced, kicked open the door and said, you're not taking this deal. I'm taking this deal. And you know why? And the guy said, absolutely. Yes, sir. Who do you think that was?
A big, tall guy. Got to be a basketball player.
No, it was William Gates Sr. And his partner to buy it was Bill Gates Jr. So why do you think now they went from 6 shops to 40,000 shops? So why do you think that family, who's famous for every other thing I could talk about here, why do you think
Eugenics.
they're
Wait,
right?
wait a minute.
Right.
You're talking about William Gates Sr., Bill Gates Jr., a family of eugenicists.
Yeah.
They wanted Starbucks because they knew it would lead to the masses being
Caffeine,
controlled.
caffeinated brains are easier to mind control. Not 100%. This group is interested in percentage gain, the mind control quotient. So the average population will produce 30% heavily compliant participants in any mind control operation. But if you poison the shit out of everybody, you can double that plus a bit because of the change in the brain function. So mind
How
control is one aspect, poison is the
how
other.
how how is it, Jason, that some of us have been able to escape all of this? No, I'm not going to say all of it because many of us, most of us, all of us have been controlled to some extent. But how is it that some of us were able to escape this whole pandemic nonsense and vaccine nonsense and social distancing nonsense and LGBTQ and climate nonsense? What is it about us that is resistant to this? Is it just statistics?
No, it's weakness or strength. Intelligence without strength is useless. So everybody that complied was also intelligent, but they were weak. So they used their intelligence to fit into a lie in order to buy into a herd, in order to feel safe, because they couldn't feel safe otherwise. They didn't have any moral strength, ethical strength, financial strength. They had no strength foundation to them whatsoever. Something about you, something about me made sure we used our equal intelligence to sidestep the lies. And we felt like we would be attacked, but because of our inner strength and sometimes our outer strength, this is what I teach, of course, to be fully strong. I teach full spectrum strength as some kind of antidote to mind control situations, because your fear of the herd will sort of mark your compliance threshold with any psychological operation. So if you don't have any strength or you're weak in other areas, you're only strongest as your weakest link. So if you're strong on every level, but you don't have a financial strength factor, and they tell you went out and took out so many loans when it was prime plus 2, and they tell you got to take the jab or you lose your job, therefore you're weak financially. So you're going to go where the bigger herd is, where the safety is. So basically, between the people who complied and didn't comply, there's intelligence factors or spectrums on both sides. But if you don't pair intelligence with strength, you will run to the middle of a herd like a frightened zebra. And if you're a strong zebra, prancing outside the herd when the lion's tracking everybody, looking for its food, and you're a zebra that could bench 300 pounds and run 100 meter dash in 10 and a half seconds, and you're financially strong, you tell the lion, hey, you know what? Do your damnedest. It's not going to be me. Go get someone else, because the lion will be like, I'm not coming to try and eat you. I'll get my teeth kicked in. So this is how mind control operates. It operates where the best mind control operations are like the ones in 2020. They weakened the shit out of people for 50 years prior. 70% of Americans are obese or overweight. 50% of American teens under the age of 18 are obese or overweight. Medication, the US population consumes, the US population is 4% of the entire world, consumes 70% of the world's pharmaceutical drugs, and are 60th in life expectancy. Now, this drugging of the population is also part of mind control operations. It's an ancient art form known as pharmakia. That's where we get the word pharmacy and pharmacist from. Pharmakia is mentioned in the Bible. It's witchcraft, sorcery, and black magic poisoning. And if you can poison your population before you launch the repetitive-based mind control attack, you will get a huge increase in your mind control quotient, which means lots of people are going to bite hard because they're poisoned. Poisoned animals are weaker. Weaker animals need the herd. That's what you want to trigger in the nervous system.
So are we talking about self-sabotage here? Is that
Well,
ultimately this, is it always boils back down to self-sabotage? We're weak, and we're weak because we've done it to ourselves over the course of time without even really knowing it. And then we're crying for help, maybe, but we're not looking in the right places. We're not talking to the right people. We don't even know what's really wrong with us.
yeah,
But
and go ahead, Sean.
so you go with the herd to feel accepted, to feel safe, but really there's an inside of you that is still longing for something better, but you don't know what it is. I mean, and people have made jokes about it over the years. SNL back in the old days, remember Stuart Smalley? I'm good enough. I'm
Smart enough.
and people, yeah, people like me and all of that stuff. The daily self affirmations, but I mean, when we self-sabotage, what is it we're doing to ourselves? And I know it's not a conscious thing. Maybe in some cases it is, but I would say probably that's the minority of cases.
Well, you said something that got my attention. You said, people think there's something wrong with them. Let me tell you, if you're out there beating the shit out of yourself, stepping into one bucket of shit and then quickly jumping out into two more, and that's your life, I'm going to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. You're actually working as designed. It's the social engineers that do this on purpose. So there are things that make you weaker. There are things that burn away your financial assets. There are things that give you brain damage. So you have no other option but to work for someone and, work for that classic $80,000 to $120,000 a year, or $60,000 to $120,000. The group I'm talking about organizes the repetitive content in your schooling, in your TV shows, in your movies, in your music videos, in your newspapers. So the repetitive content is what drives you to smoke, drives you to vape, drives you to smoke marijuana, drives you to do cocaine, drives you to do all the narcotics, drives you to be a wine mom, drives you to join the gym and never go. Most people go to the gym twice. One time, January 2023 to join, January 1st, 2024 to quit. Never went and worked out one time, went twice, once to join up, once to quit. All this is programmed into people using standard mind control tactics, because if they poisoned you, it's the same thing as the invisible enemy versus the real enemy. If they showed up with thugs on your lawn on a Friday night, held you down, and force fed you Harveys and beer, you'd be like, hey, whoa. What are you guys doing here? There's something nefarious going on here. But if I can trick you through standard mind control operations, just like the way those people stole cars when they watched Gone in 60 Seconds, I can mind control you to poison yourself. How confusing is it then that you can't stop? And then I get my way anyway because you're weak. And then I'm going to fabricate the next fake crisis. And I'm going to control all the content of your movies and TV shows and government announcements. And because of you and your weakened state, because you're poisoning yourself by your own hand, you're more compliant. So I'm going to get my way with you all the time. So what we call self-sabotage is simply an extension of these mind control modalities. I'm going to tell you how powerful mind control can be. If someone doesn't think that they can be tricked to become an alcoholic, let me tell you something. There's a made for Netflix special called The Push. And I will send it to you, Shadow, after we're done today. It's a 1-hour presentation. Netflix hired one of the best mind control experts in the world, but he uses it for entertainment and knows how to make his money. His name is Darren Brown, and he is out of the UK. So he and this isn't his first special. This is just, I don't know, he's done so many. This one people really need to watch. So he fabricates a scenario, all scripts it out months in advance. There's 70 actors and there's one mind control victim. The mind control victim has no idea what's going on. And although this special is 1 hour long and they clip it all together, sort of the mind control operation was about two hours long. And during this 2-hour Netflix, the filming, this mind control victim and these 70 actors pushed all the mind control modalities that I've been talking about so far, one on top of the other of this mind control victim: fear, repetitive content, poisoning, group pressure, social pressure. And it mounts and it mounts and it mounts. And regardless of how this happens, the end scene is on the top of a 10-story building. And you'll have to watch how it got there. And there's an old man on top of the 10-story building. He's on the side of the wall, the precipice. He's got his feet dangling over. And the group these actors are really working the mind control modalities on this poor mind control victim. And for the mind control victim to make sure to remove his group pressure, all he has to do is go push that old man off the side of the building. Now, don't worry. They're all actors, including the old man. It's not an old man. It's a stunt man. And he's in Hollywood makeup. And he's young. And he's harnessed, but you can't see the harnesses. This example was run 4 times. 3 out of the 4 people murdered the man live on video. That's with 2 hours of mind control impregnation. Whoever's listening to this, you've been under similar mind control operations since the day you flew out of the womb. So if they can make someone kill another human being in only 2 hours, and again, the guy was harnessed, and when the mind control victim pushed the guy off the side of the building, killing them, a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists came out and said, hey, you know what? This is Darren Brown. You're on a show. You didn't really kill the guy. Very unethical. But it can show the power of what these modalities are capable of. So don't ever be surprised that they got 3 billion people to line up and participate in what they participated in. Because it's child's play if you know the way the group pressure works. The only reason the 3 out of the 4 people in the push murdered the old man live on TV was because of group pressure. That was it. Because we want to be accepted by the group. And if the pressure's high enough and the fear is high enough, we will always comply. And this is the same techniques that was used in the push were used against the public and weaponized against the public from 2020 till now. And before 2020 as well, the same tactics have always been used.
Sounds like the Ingram experiments from the early 1960s. I think I've got that one right, where they had a bunch of people in a room and they were to push a button or turn a dial in terms of torturing a subject they couldn't see, but they could hear. And something like 90% of these people, maybe a bit lower, pushed the button to the point where the person on the other side of the room they were torturing just died. And the only reason go ahead.
What was the Milgram experiment?
Milgram, right. Yes, Milgram. Yeah. And the only reason they actually did it was because they were dealing with a person in authority, I believe. Wasn't that the conclusion that came out of this?
Well, basically, yeah, it was the Milgram experiment, and there was electric shocks to be given to a participant that was behind the wall. Again, the person behind the wall were supposed to scream and react like the shocks were real. They were all actors, including the doctor that would say, please continue. If the person loses consciousness, it counts as a non-answer, and you will shock him again, and we will turn up the voltage again. Anything over 100 on the voltage meter was considered dangerous. 100% of people went to 100. And there was a level on it was a fabricated voltage meter, but there was a level of shock that was considered fatal. And about 65% went to the fatal shock level simply because a person in authority told them to. Now, more importantly, it was a person in a white lab coat. This psychological experiment was not lost in the COVID operation, as early in the COVID PSYOP, Dr. Anthony Fauci was paraded out. They went to the NIH where he worked, and he was wearing a white lab coat as Trump basically toured. Trump was in power at that time. He was the president early in the COVID PSYOP, and Dr. Fauci was displayed exactly for this reason, because it's been shown that if a man in a white lab coat, which is the same coat that a butcher wears, this is the average person fails to understand that the butcher that slaughters animals at your market is wears the same clothing as your medical doctor for various ancient reasons, that if a medical doctor in white lab coat tells you, the high priest tells you what to do, you are hardwired neurologically to comply, because authority is what will lead you to safety in the nervous system if you're afraid. And all this, plus thousands of more little cues, little nuances, fine nuances, were weaponized against the public during the COVID operation.
What made people go further? And I'm not talking about taking the vaccine or adhering to the regulations and the restrictions and whatnot. You had people like Gene Simmons, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jimmy Kimmel, all of these big name Hollywood stars or music stars come out and say, if you are walking amongst us unvaccinated, you are the enemy, and so on. And I believe Jimmy Kimmel's big thing was, if I've got a hospital bed for a guy who's been vaccinated versus a guy who's been unvaccinated, well, then it's good night, Wheezy. I mean, these people actually said some very horrible things publicly in front of millions of people. Do you think they understand now what they did, or did they understand then even? Or were they just going with the crowd?
I'll address it in two stages. Kimmel, Stern, who else did you mention there? Gene Simmons. These sort of people have membership in the group that I'm talking about. In the group, when the phone rings, they are not allowed to deny the order. So in certain secret societies, if a higher ranking member tells you to do something, you are not allowed to deny them that request. There are other people that do not sit at the table and take these orders, but they still did what you said. This again has to do with internal weakness. So the subconscious counts repetitive content, and it would have counted who's getting rewarded and who's getting punished. So if there was a doctor that spoke up, if there was a celebrity that spoke up, there's a psychological operation process called shooting a hostage, and you're not going to do it quietly. You're going to make sure it's public, messy, and you want it all over all the news stations all at once to signal the subconscious of everybody watching what's appropriate behavior and what's not appropriate. Now, if you're weak and your subconscious is taking in all the rewarded behavior that is getting the limelight on all the TV stations, your subconscious says, you're weak. That's the group that's going to protect you. So all these super aggressive mask, and everybody's trying to out Nazi each other in this regard, some of them. And they were doing it because of this full spectrum weakness that they carry inside of themselves. They were literally trying to flash the gang signs of the perceived stronger group to say, hey, hey, I don't know if you're looking, but please notice me. I'm with you. And I'm going to do your bidding on your behalf without you telling me. So I'm going to hope to rank hierarchy inside your tyrannical group because I'm such a weak human being on the inside that I can't survive on my own as a zebra unless I'm in the middle of a herd. So when you saw people trying to out-Nazi each other, that's what was going on. You were seeing a reflection of internal weakness coupled with the purposeful strategic shooting of hostages. Let's attack this doctor. Let's attack this councilman. Let's attack this person. Let's attack this star. Anybody that spoke up, they make it loud, messy, and so everybody can hear. And anybody that complies, they make it equally loud, and so everybody can hear. And that signals that herd-based behavior tracking system in the subconscious so that weak people can know which team to go to in order to protect their weak ass.
The table you were talking about that these people sit at, or some don't, but they really love to, and so they'll do the bidding of the cabal in order to maybe get a place there. You talked about this earlier in our discussion. Why don't we go into this now? I mean, this is it a family? Is it 13 families? Is it 300 families? Is it a satanic cult? What is this? What does your research tell you?
It's all in one. It's everything in one. It's everything in one. It's not one family. It's many families. They're connected. They're connected by blood. They have weird belief systems. They have belief systems that would baffle the average person. So it's best not to get into it. But they could watch a documentary if they were really interested. One of the best documentaries made about this group is called Cult of the Medics. It is made by a Canadian documentary filmmaker. His name is David Whitehead, and it's free on the internet. You just go cultofthemedics.com, go to chapters, and start watching. And sometimes it's a little bit over dramatic, maybe a bit too much use of music, but it has very clear and concise content about who this group is, what their goals are, how they're very old. And the people you see on the screens, they're employees of the month, Doug Ford's, Justin Trudeau's, the Bidens, everybody. You know, Starmer in the UK. These are all staffers.
It comes right. So it comes down from some shadowy top, and it just filters down. When we look at people like Trudeau, Starmer, as you say, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. Now, what about Donald Trump?
My belief is yes. My belief is that in the U.S., it's a relay race. It's the same concept everywhere. It's a relay race. You got to make sure the people comply with what's going on. So you have to put on a show for them every 4 years. And it's a relay race. And basically, there's an evil, Dr. Evil political group. And there is supposedly the moral and right group. And if you haven't noticed, they all pass the same laws, but in different ways. So let's look at the U.S. system. You have the Democrats. Some people call them the demon rats. Though they're the sort of antichrist of the play, the drama that goes on to appease the public. Now they're expected to pass laws that are inherently evil. They have people that lead the party that are clinically psychopathic. And so when this group comes to power, whether through voting or illegally or rigged elections, the average citizen, because of the programming, expect that these actors to take away their rights in very vicious and evil ways. And that's what they do. And then you have the other side, the Republicans. Now, they will always pass the same laws. And if you notice when there's a change of power, none of the groups will go repeal any of the laws of the former group that was in charge because it's a relay race. So the good guys, the light side of the force, the Luke Skywalker side of the drama, is the Republicans, but they pass the same laws just in different ways, because the owners of the U.S. corporation, because the United States is a corporation, it's a business, and the corporate headquarters is the District of Columbia, which has laws that don't apply to them as applies to regular U.S. citizens. Now, the Republicans will pass the exact same laws because it's a relay race to enslave the entire U.S. population in order to steal their wealth and their energy to build this weird religious dystopia that no one knows anything about because it's a very old religion they're trying to raise from the ashes here. The Republicans will wait for the owners of the United States corporation to purposely manufacture a false flag, which will give the pressure for the Republicans to say, hey, you know what? We promised you this, but we're really sorry. We said we protect your freedoms, but this is an exception. Did you see that just happened? Which the corporate owners organized in the first place. Did you see that? Can't let that happen again. So although we promised to be the light side of the force and to protect your freedoms and your rights, unfortunately, you can understand, if you are in our position, that in this case, we'll have to remove your rights and freedoms in this little area only. Don't worry, it won't happen again. It's false flag, false flag, false flag, false flag. So that's how the Republicans get in the same direction as the clinical psychopaths over on the Democratic side. This is the horse and pony show, the smoke and mirrors show that has been going on in the United States for a very long time. And you can understand the mind control operation that here's the mind control operation. The easiest way to kill anybody and the easiest way to steal their money is let their own government do it to their own people. Because if you had China walk in to the United States right now and said, you know what, we're going to lock you down and inject you with poison and steal half your income, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, they're going to fight back. It's war, obviously.
It's war, right? But if I can mind control you to the point where you believe in this paradigm, and there's nothing, these are huge mind control operations to make someone believe that some other human has the right, not just the ability to steal your money and inject you with poison, but the right to do it, is a huge mind control operation. And so what's going on in the United States, that they re-rigged all the, behavior modification. Everybody was sort of crawling away from the idea of government between 2020 and 2024. And have you noticed they managed to circle the wagons and get everybody back in voting again, saying, look, who's going to steal my money? Who's going to inject me with poison? I want this guy to do it. No, I want this guy. I want this girl to do it. No, I want this guy to do it. It's a huge operation to control the repetitive content of social media, newspapers, radios, movies, TV shows, to get people begging that someone has the right to do any of this to these people.
You talked, you know what? You said that you didn't want to get into the conversation about who's running the show here because it's a very long, convoluted explanation, and possibly that's another appearance on the show. But I mean, you did just mention, Jason, that there is a very old religion that they're trying to resurrect here. And that obviously caught my attention. Can you give us a little bit about that?
I'll give you a little bit about it. Here, I'll give you one example, and then I'll send you an article. Okay. So if you go to Philadelphia to the Jeffersonian Medical School, Jefferson Medical School, Jefferson University, they're sort of connected. You will find a bull, a very specific bull, on a pillar, on a raised pillar in the courtyard there. Now, this is called the winged ox of St. Luke. Okay. So this particular bull has wings on it. It's got the horns. Oddly enough, though, on the side of the bull is a square cut out. I don't know how many people, and they control your education, so I don't expect you to know what that is a symbol of. But this is a symbol of the ancient cult of Moloch or Molesh, Molech. Now, this group was famous for its belief. Now, I'm not going to tell you I believe it, but what should concern you is that they believe it. So if you go back